The ribbon routine was flawless, a blur of practiced grace that should have secured Ellie's spot. But when the fourth place medal hung around her neck, not the first, her face crumpled, a betrayal witnessed by the entire auditorium. My own chest tightened, a cold fist clenching. I felt the slow burn of injustice. Some days you just don't have it, the head judge offered, a dismissive shrug that twisted the knife. The fluorescent lights of the gymnasium had done little to warm the air. Ellie, at 15, had moved through her ribbon routine with a fluidity that caught the light, each toss and catch precise. The crowd knew it. I knew it. But the scoreboard, when it flashed, told a different story. Fourth place. Not enough for nationals. I watched my daughter's face. It started with a small tremor around her mouth, then her chin began to quiver. Her eyes, usually so bright, filled with a quiet despair. She stood on the podium, small against the backdrop of the banner, the bronze medal heavy on her chest. It was not the medal she had worked for. I was 42, my hands calloused from years of wrenching on engines at Peterson's auto repair. My life was steady, predictable, but Ellie's dream, that had been the unpredictable part. Susan and I had built our lives around it, around her. We'd pushed hard, taken out a second mortgage on the house to cover the endless fees, the travel, the special equipment. Every dollar, every hour, poured into this. Now, seeing that look on her face, I felt the weight of it all, a hollow ache where pride should have been. Later, the garage was cold, even with the small space heater humming. The smell of oil and old gasoline hung in the air. I ran a rag over a carburetor, my movements automatic, my mind replaying the competition. Every spin, every leap, every ribbon swirl. I saw it again and again. The scores didn't add up. Not to me. I wasn't a judge, but I knew what I saw. Something felt off, a loose bolt in a finely tuned machine. Susan came down with a mug of coffee, steam rising in the chill. She leaned against the workbench, her breath fogging slightly. "You're still stewing about this, Dave," she said, her voice even. "Sometimes they just pick somebody else. It happens." She'd been practical her whole life, saw things in black and white. To her, it was just a bad day, another setback. "She'll bounce back. She always does." She took a sip of her coffee, her gaze direct, trying to reassure me. She thought I was just being an overprotective father, seeing ghosts in the scoring system. But it wasn't just the scoring. It was Ellie. She'd been quiet since we got home. Not the usual post-competition analysis, not the plans for the next training cycle. Just a heavy silence. She hadn't even touched her dinner. The next morning, when I asked her about practice, she just shrugged. "Later, maybe," she mumbled, not looking at me. That was the real alarm bell. Ellie never missed practice, not unless she was truly sick. I told my foreman I had a dentist appointment. Instead, I drove to Olympus Gymnastics Academy. The place was bustling, kids of all ages stretching, tumbling, spotting each other. I kept to the edges, a ghost among the parents perched on the observation bleachers. Coach Hayes was on the floor, mid-40s, lean, with a military cut that always seemed too sharp for a gymnastics coach. He moved with an authority that bordered on rigid. I watched him correcting a girl on the balance beam, his hand resting on her lower back, a touch that seemed to linger a moment too long before he moved on. He did it again with another girl, Chloe Turner, 14, already showing signs of serious talent. His hand rested on her arm, his thumb tracing a line on her sleeve. It was subtle, maybe nothing, but it snagged my attention. Beth Turner, Chloe's mother, sat a few rows in front of me. Her back was stiff, her shoulders pulled tight. When Hayes glanced up, his eyes meeting hers for a brief second, Beth quickly looked away, staring straight ahead at the wall. A small detail, but it stood out. After practice, I found Hayes by the office door. "Coach," I started, trying to keep my voice even. Ellie was pretty down after qualifiers. She felt like she really nailed that routine. Hayes barely shifted his weight. His eyes, light blue and cold, met mine. "Ellie's a good gymnast, Dave. No doubt." He paused, then added, "But some girls, they just want it more. They have that extra fire." My jaw tightened. "She's been working harder than anyone." He gave a slight, dismissive smile. "Hard work is one thing. Drive is another. Some are willing to do whatever it takes to succeed." The words hung in the air, heavy and ambiguous. He turned, the conversation clearly over. As I walked out past the changing rooms, I saw Chloe Turner heading toward Hayes' office. She looked small, her gym bag slung over her shoulder. The office door closed behind her, a click that sounded too loud in the empty hallway. A private session, I heard another parent mention as I passed. Dinner that night was a quiet affair. Ellie pushed pasta around her plate, the tines of her fork scraping against the ceramic with a high-pitched whine. Susan kept glancing at me, a silent plea to ease the tension. "Ellie," I started as gently as I could, "is there something going on with Coach Hayes?" Her head snapped up, her eyes, wide and startled, fixed on me. "What are you talking about?" The fork clattered onto her plate. "I'm tired," she blurted, her voice cracking. She pushed her chair back with a loud scrape that echoed in the small dining room, then stood and bolted upstairs. The sound of her bedroom door closing was a dull thud. An hour passed. The house was silent. Then Susan came down from Ellie's room. Her face was white as chalk, her eyes wide and rimmed with red. She walked slowly, mechanically toward me. "Dave," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We need to talk." Susan sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Her voice was thin, a reedy whisper that kept catching in her throat as she pieced together Ellie's confession. It was like watching someone try to assemble a broken vase, each fragment sharp, each memory bringing a fresh tremor to her hands. Ellie had been going to these private coaching sessions with Coach Hayes for months. Not just for technique, but for mental toughness, Hayes had said. He talked about flexibility in all ways, a phrase that now echoed with a sickening double meaning. He'd sent her texts late at night, strategy texts, asking her to come in early, stay late, always alone. He'd praised her dedication and her potential, but always with a caveat, a hint that there was more to achieving success than just practice. Ellie swore he never touched her, not in the way you might think, but he'd made it clear that openness, a certain kind of vulnerability, was key. It was about trust, he'd told her. Trust him, and she'd go to nationals. My hands, usually calm and steady, curled into fists under the table. The cold from the garage, the faint smell of oil that clung to my clothes, suddenly felt like a part of me, a chill seeping into my bones. A quiet rage, low and deep, began to build. It wasn't a loud, explosive anger, but something far colder, far more dangerous. It was the kind of anger that corroded, that settled in the gut and slowly ate away at everything else. Ellie was terrified. She'd made Susan promise not to say anything. "They'll just make it worse for me, Mom," she'd crawled, her voice muffled against Susan's shoulder. "It's an open secret. The older girls, they all know. If you say something, Hayes will just say I'm not dedicated. He'll cut me. Everyone will think I'm making it up." The fear in her voice had been palpable, a raw wound, an open secret. The phrase coiled in my stomach. How many other girls? How many parents? I lay awake that night, the bedroom ceiling a dark, unyielding expanse. The image of Ellie on the podium, her small, crumpled face, replayed in my mind. All those early mornings, the strained finances, the canceled family trips, all for a dream that had been systematically tainted, twisted into something ugly. I thought of the other parents, the ones who always seemed to be at the gym, cheering their daughters on. Did they know, or did they look away, rationalizing it as toughness, as the price of elite sports? Did they tell themselves it was just how things worked in the competitive world? I pictured Mike Jensen, whose daughter Amy was a few years older than Ellie, also at Olympus. Would he have seen something? Would he have ignored it? The next day, under the hood of a Ford F-150, I saw my chance. Mike Jensen was waiting for his oil change. I wiped my hands on a rag, trying to keep my voice casual. "Hey, Mike, how's Amy doing with gymnastics?" Mike grunted, shifting his weight. He was a big man, usually easygoing, but today he seemed to shrink. "She's good. You know, long hours." He avoided my eyes, staring at the chipped paint on the waiting room wall. "Ellie's had a rough time lately," I pushed, keeping my tone light. "Seems like things are intense over there at Olympus." Mike mumbled something about politics and how things work in these elite sports. He looked uncomfortable, his gaze flicking to the service counter, then back to the floor. It's a tough world, Dave. Lot of pressure. You gotta be strong. He picked up a brochure, his signal that the conversation was over. He wasn't going to engage. He wasn't going to look. A heavy sense of isolation settled over me. It felt like the whole system was rigged, protected by a wall of denial, by parents who wanted their kids to succeed so badly they'd ignore the shadows. But I couldn't back down. Not when Ellie's spirit, that bright, fiery spark, had been crushed under the weight of something unspoken and unclean. Susan, despite her fear, held my gaze. Her hands still trembled, but her eyes were firm. "We can't just let this go, Dave," she said, her voice stronger now. "Not for Ellie. There's no other option." Her fear was real, but so was her resolve. She saw it too. We couldn't unsee it. I started watching, not just the other cars in the garage, but the girls when I picked Ellie up, when I dropped her off. The way some of them flinched when Hayes raised his voice, a quick, almost imperceptible jerk. The way others, the older ones, seemed to lean into his attention, a practiced smile, a too eager nod. I saw the mothers on the bleachers, some chatting brightly, others with that same rigid posture Beth Turner had, their eyes fixed but unseeing. I began to compile a mental list, small observations, odd occurrences, a quiet hum of unease. It was like being handed a puzzle with missing pieces, each detail a potential clue. The usual patience I had as a mechanic, the methodical troubleshooting, began to transform. It wasn't just about fixing engines anymore. It was about something far more vital. A quiet determination hardened in me, a steadfast resolve that felt cold and unyielding. My lunch breaks, once spent eating a sandwich at my workbench, now saw me parked across the street from Olympus Gymnastics Academy. I'd eat a cold turkey sandwich, watching the flow of parents and kids, observing Hayes when he was outside, or through the large windows of the main gym. I noticed how he moved, the way he singled out certain girls. Chloe Turner, the girl I'd seen going into his office, used to be one of the most vibrant gymnasts, a quick, almost electric energy in her movements. Now I saw a subtle shift. Her sparkle was gone. She seemed to move through her routines with a forced precision, her eyes downcast more often than not. She kept to herself, rarely laughing with the other girls. It was a quiet kind of withdrawal, almost imperceptible if you weren't looking for it. I saw Beth Turner one afternoon, loading her gym bag into her minivan. I walked over trying to keep my expression open, sympathetic. "Hey Beth," I said, "how's Chloe doing? Ellie's still pretty down about qualifiers." Beth froze, her hands on the open trunk. She turned slowly, her eyes darting past me, then back to my face, but not quite meeting my gaze. Her mouth was a tight line. "Chloe's fine, Dave, you know, just working hard." She pulled away, a nervous energy radiating from her. "It's a tough sport, not for everyone." She closed the trunk with a decisive thud and got into her van, driving off quickly. It was a clear dismissal, a subtle but firm boundary. She didn't want to talk. Back at Peterson's Auto, I started subtly probing customers. "Your kids still at Olympus?" I'd ask as I handed back their keys. "Heard that place is pretty intense." Most gave vague, unsettling responses. "Yeah, it's a grind," one father said. "But you gotta push 'em, right?" Another mother just sighed. "It's all about the coaches. They make or break 'em." No one offered anything concrete, but the undercurrent of unspoken knowledge was there, a shared discomfort that everyone seemed to accept as part of the deal. Then one Tuesday, Martha came in for a tire rotation. Her daughter Sarah had been a promising gymnast at Olympus a few years back, before abruptly disappearing from the circuit. "Martha," I began after the pleasantries, "how's Sarah these days? She still doing gymnastics?" Martha's face clouded. "Oh no, she quit. Suddenly." She paused, her gaze distant. "Developed pretty bad anxiety. Just stopped going. Wouldn't talk about it much." She rubbed her arm, a nervous habit. Only thing she ever really said was that Coach Hayes made her uncomfortable. Martha's voice dropped to a whisper. Wouldn't say why, just that she couldn't be there anymore. No details, just uncomfortable. It was not much, but it was the first time I'd heard a name, a direct link, however vague. That night, after Susan and Ellie were asleep, I started digging. Old online forums, local parenting groups, gymnastics message boards. I searched for Olympus Gymnastics Academy, Coach Hayes, toxic coaching. I scrolled through endless posts, anonymous discussions about toxic coaching environments, burnout, and mental health issues at competitive gyms across the country. I cross-referenced names and dates, looking for any connections to Olympus. There were plenty of complaints about harsh training methods, favoritism, and emotional pressure, but nothing direct, nothing that named Hayes specifically in a way that screamed abuse. No smoking gun, just a lot of smoke. Susan started to notice. "Dave," she said one evening, watching me hunch over my laptop, the screen illuminating my face in the dark living room. "You're not sleeping. This quiet obsession, it's consuming you." Her voice was laced with worry. "What if you push too hard? What if you fail? We could lose everything, Dave. They could make it even harder for Ellie." Her fears were valid. The repercussions could be devastating. I felt the pressure, the weight of her words, but then I saw Ellie still pushing food around her plate, still not looking me in the eye, her sadness a constant, heavy blanket in our house. That lack of interest in everything, in life itself, fueled my resolve. I couldn't stop. Then I found it. A cryptic social media post from a former Olympus gymnast, Sarah Jenkins. It was old, dated from 3 years ago, before her profile went dark. A simple photo of her with a medal and the caption, "Some dreams come with a price you never intend to pay." No names, no specifics, but the bitterness in the words, the underlying sorrow, resonated with what Ellie and Martha had hinted at. It was a whisper from the past, confirming the pattern, the undercurrent. It galvanized me. Whispers weren't enough. I needed solid proof, something tangible, something that couldn't be dismissed. I considered confronting the gym management directly, but I knew how it would go. A quick, polite dismissal. Hayes was their star coach, the one who brought in the medals, the prestige, the tuition fees. They'd protect him, cover it up. They always did. So I started a new document on my computer. A detailed timeline. Date, time, observation. Hayes' comments, Ellie's reactions, my own observations of Chloe and other girls. Martha's story. Sarah Jenkins' post. Every small detail meticulously recorded. The weight of proving Ellie's unspoken truth and potentially protecting other girls settled heavily on my shoulders. It was a lonely burden, a cold, silent task. I arranged a meeting with Coach Hayes, feigning concern about Ellie's future and her recent slump. Before I went in, I set my phone screen down on the small table in my pocket, the recording app running. The office was small, neat, filled with framed photos of smiling gymnasts and trophies. Hayes sat across from me, his posture impeccable, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on his lips. "Ellie's a talented girl, Mr. Peterson," as he began, his voice smooth, controlled. "But talent isn't always enough. This sport, it demands a different kind of dedication." Yeah, I brought up the private sessions, the late-night texts, phrasing them as parental concerns about her time management and mental load. He deflected every veiled accusation with practiced ease, maintaining an air of detached innocence. He talked about individualized attention, about building resilience. "My methods are unconventional, Mr. Peterson," Hayes stated, that cool smile never leaving his face. "But they produce champions. You see the results." He gestured vaguely toward the trophies lining the shelf. Then his tone shifted, subtly, like a shadow passing over the sun. "I understand your concern, but pushing too hard, asking too many questions, it can create unnecessary trouble. For the athlete, it can jeopardize a girl's reputation, her potential future in the sport." The threat was clear, wrapped in the guise of advice. Undeterred, the next day I made an appointment with Mr. Harrison, the gym's owner. I laid out my concerns, carefully omitting the more volatile details, sticking to the pattern of behavior, the unconventional methods that made Ellie uncomfortable. I expected support, a listening ear, perhaps an investigation. Instead, Harrison was instantly defensive. "Coach Hayes is a pillar of this community, Mr. Peterson," Harrison insisted, his voice rising slightly. "His record speaks for itself. We've got girls going to college on full scholarships because of him. What exactly are you suggesting? He leaned forward, his gaze hardening. Are you just a disgruntled parent whose daughter didn't make the cut? It sounds like you're trying to tarnish a good man's name because of a disappointing competition result. He dismissed my observations as parental paranoia, fueled by sour grapes. The institutional resistance was heavy, a solid wall of protection around the gym's image and its star coach. I left feeling a cold despair, but I didn't give up. I called local child protective services. The woman on the phone was polite, professional. She listened patiently. Mr. Peterson, she finally said, I understand your concerns, but we need concrete evidence. Vague discomfort, a coach's unconventional methods, text about strategy. These are not sufficient grounds for an investigation. We need a direct accusation, a report of specific physical or emotional abuse, not just parental suspicion. It was a dead end. That evening, a quiet, almost imperceptible argument began in the kitchen. Ellie, who had been sitting in the living room, must have heard snippets, hushed words carrying through the thin walls. She appeared in the doorway, her face streaked with tears. Dad, she choked out, her voice raw. Please, just stop. He'll make it worse. He'll make sure I never compete again. Please. Her terror was palpable, a desperate plea to let it go. Susan turned on me then, her own fear bubbling to the surface. Dave, look at her. What are we doing? Is this worth it? We're hurting her more than helping. What if he retaliates? What if they blackball her from every gym in the state? Our voices were low, tense, a quiet storm brewing. I was torn, a deep chasm opening inside me. Protect Ellie from further pain, from the potential retaliation, from the very real possibility of destroying her dream altogether, or uphold my promise to fight for her, to expose the rod I knew was there. The thought of her broken spirit was a constant ache. A few days later, a plain white envelope appeared in our mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper typed, "Drop it, Peterson, for the sake of your family." No signature, no specific threat, but the message was chillingly clear. It was an anonymous letter, but it was anything but faceless. It was a direct punch, a cold warning. But instead of deterring me, the threat ignited a colder, more determined fire in my Midwestern resolve. This wasn't just about Ellie anymore. This was bigger. This was about exposing a deeply entrenched system of silence, a network of fear and complicity. The stakes had just gotten higher. The anonymous threat, coupled with Ellie's growing distress, made the decision for me. I couldn't back down. Not now. I had to go public. It was a terrifying thought, but the alternative, silence and the continued corrosion of Ellie's spirit, was far worse. I found Sarah Jenkins' contact information through an old yearbook and several cold calls. She was 20 now, working a few towns over. It took several attempts, a carefully worded email, and a voicemail explaining I was Ellie Peterson's father before she finally agreed to meet me at a diner, far from Olympus. She sat across from me, her posture still carrying a gymnastic discipline, but her eyes held a weariness that belied her age. She spoke slowly, hesitantly at first, her voice low. Hayes had never touched her either, she clarified, but his manipulation had been relentless. The comments about her weight, her appearance, her dedication, the isolating private sessions where he'd break her down mentally, then build her back up, making her feel dependent on him for validation, for success. He made it feel like I owed him, she whispered, her hands gripping her coffee mug. Like my success was his to give if I was just cooperative enough. She identified other girls who had quietly left Olympus, including Martha's daughter Sarah, confirming my suspicions. They'd all gone through similar patterns of psychological abuse, leaving with shattered confidence and unexplained anxiety. Armed with Sarah's testimony, a story that finally had names and specific experiences, I approached a local news reporter I'd found online, one who specialized in community issues. I promised discretion, a compelling story, and told her I believed there were more voices waiting to be heard. She listened, her notepad filling, her expression serious. Susan was terrified, Her hands trembled as she helped me organize my notes, review Sarah's account. "Dave," she whispered, her voice tight, "once this is out there, there's no taking it back. Everything changes." But her eyes, though full of fear, held a resolute glint. She knew there was no turning back either. The news story broke 2 days later. Olympus Gymnastics coach under scrutiny. The headline blared across the local news website, quickly making its way to social media. The article detailed the Petersons' concerns, Ellie's uncharacteristic withdrawal, and Sarah Jenkins' brave testimony about psychological manipulation. A wave of shock moved through the community. The public exposure, raw and immediate, had an unexpected effect. It emboldened others. The very next day, my phone rang. It was Beth Turner. It was him. Her voice was thick with tears. "Dave," she choked out, "I read the article. It's Chloe. She told me things, similar things." Beth, who had avoided my gaze just weeks ago, was now ready to come forward. Her daughter, Chloe, had her own story, a chilling echo of Sarah's. Ellie was immediately thrust into the media storm. Classmates asked hushed questions, strangers stared, and the local paper called, wanting a quote, a picture. She retreated further, her already fragile spirit strained under the new pressure. Coach Hayes, through his attorney, issued a public statement. He vehemently denied all allegations, calling them baseless smears and unsubstantiated claims by disgruntled individuals. He threatened legal action against the news station and all accusers. Mr. Harrison, the gym owner, she also released a statement publicly defending the gym's integrity and commitment to its athletes. But he also announced that Coach Hayes would be suspended, pending an internal investigation. It was a token gesture, a temporary measure to appease the public. The community became deeply divided. Some parents and former gymnasts vehemently defended Hayes, citing his coaching prowess and the championships he'd brought home. Others rallied behind the Petersons and the accusers, their voices tentative at first, then growing louder. We received a wave of unexpected support from strangers, messages of solidarity, offers of help, but also intense backlash, hateful comments online, anonymous phone calls, threats. The weight of public opinion, both good and bad, became an unbearable pressure, a constant hum in the background of our lives. But my gaze remained fixed on justice, on what was right. We were no longer alone. We found strength in the growing number of families ready to speak out, finding a collective voice in the storm. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The moment the news story broke, Olympus Gymnastics Academy moved with ruthless efficiency. They hired a high-powered legal team, a firm known for defending institutions against public outcry. Their goal was clear: protect Hayes, protect the gym's reputation, and make this problem disappear. Through a local advocacy group, we were connected with Ann Miller, a pro bono lawyer specializing in child advocacy cases. She was sharp, her eyes clear and unblinking, betraying no emotion as she laid out the arduous path ahead. "This won't be easy," she told us, her voice calm but firm, as Dave, Susan, Beth, and Chloe's father sat around her conference table. "They will try to discredit your daughters, to discredit you. There will be emotional tolls and the need for painful testimonies. We need every detail, every memory, no matter how uncomfortable." Ellie, Chloe, and Sarah Jenkins were all preparing to give official statements. I watched Ellie sit with Anne, recounting the late-night texts, the flexibility in all ways, her voice barely audible. It tore at me to see her relive it, but I knew it was necessary. Hayes' defense team immediately went on the offensive. They issued a press release calling the accusations a malicious attempt to harm a respected coach's career, and filed motions to challenge the validity of our claims. They dug into my past, highlighting my initial disappointment with Ellie's judging at qualifiers, twisting it into a narrative that my accusations stemmed from a personal vendetta, a disgruntled parent seeking revenge. The Petersons, once just a family in a quiet Midwestern town, now lived under a microscope. The online harassment escalated, vile comments about Ellie, about Susan and me, appearing on local forums and social media. Anonymous threats found their way to our mailbox again, less subtle this time. We felt a palpable social ostracization. At the grocery store, people would avert their eyes or offer terse greetings. Our small town, once a comfort, now felt like a cage. At Peterson's Auto Repair, business noticeably dropped. Regular customers, some who had been coming for years, stopped scheduling appointments. The swirling rumors, the controversy, had seeped into every corner of our lives, poisoning even our livelihood. Susan, though visibly struggling with the intense public scrutiny, found renewed strength in my unshakable resolve. There were nights she cried, her face buried in her hands, asking if it was worth it. But each time she would look at me, see the grim determination in my eyes and nod. "We have to, Dave," she'd say, "for Ellie." I reflected on the immense personal and financial cost. Our savings were dwindling, our reputation fractured. But then I looked at Ellie, who, though still struggling, had a flicker of her old fire returning, a quiet pride that she was finally speaking her truth. I reaffirmed my commitment, knowing this fight was for something greater than myself. For every silent girl, every complicit parent, every institution that turned a blind eye. The date for the preliminary hearing was set. It escalated the tension, turning the quiet simmer into a rolling boil, preparing everyone for a public battle that would leave no one unscathed. Then a surprising call. It was from a burner phone, the voice cautious. "Mr. Peterson, my name's Mark. I used to coach at Olympus. Got fired a few years back for philosophical differences." Mark had heard the news. He hinted at a deeper, systemic issue within the gym's administration, not just Hayes. He spoke of hushed conversations, of pressure from Harrison to keep quiet about certain incidents, of an environment that prioritized medals over the well-being of the gymnasts. He suggested a cover-up, a culture of complicity that extended beyond Hayes. This was the crucial insight we needed. Anne, our lawyer, emphasized the importance of solidarity among the families. "They will try to divide you," she warned. "They will pick apart your stories, but your strength is in numbers, in your collective truth." She prepared us for a long, grueling fight. I realized then that the truth, once buried, was now a weapon. And we, a small group of ordinary people, were now wielding it against a powerful, entrenched silence. The legal proceedings began like a slow grinding machine. The courtroom, stark and unforgiving, became the stage for a tense and emotionally draining ordeal. Ellie, Chloe, and Sarah Jenkins, one by one, took the stand. I watched my daughter, small and pale, recount the private sessions, the confusing comments, the pressure. Her voice, though soft, was clear. Susan held my hands so tight I thought her knuckles might break. It was a brutal thing to witness, to know my child had endured such a quiet manipulation. But their testimonies were compelling. Anne, our lawyer, meticulously cross-examined Hayes, poking holes in his smooth denials. Then came Mark, the former coach. He delivered crucial internal emails showing how Harrison and the administration had dismissed early warning signs, categorized complaints as parental overreaction, and prioritized the gym's image over the welfare of the gymnasts. His testimony laid bare the administrative negligence, the calculated culture of turning a blind eye within Olympus. The verdict came swiftly. Hayes was found guilty on several counts of misconduct and abuse of authority. A tremor went through the competitive gymnastics world, a ripple effect that stretched beyond our small town. The judge, a woman with a stern but compassionate gaze, delivered a harsh sentence. She spoke of the severe betrayal of trust, of the sanctity of the coach-athlete relationship, and the need for accountability. Olympus Gymnastics Academy faced heavy fines. Its reputation was severely damaged, a name once synonymous with excellence now tainted by scandal. Mr. Harrison, the gym's owner, quietly stepped down, citing personal reasons, though everyone knew the truth. The gym was forced to overhaul its safeguarding policies, to implement changes that should have been in place all along. The community, though slow to fully heal, gradually acknowledged the truth. People who had once whispered accusations now offered quiet apologies. Customers returned to Peterson's Auto Repair, a quiet testament to a hard-won respect for my unwavering fight. The shop hummed again, a steady rhythm that felt like a healing balm. Ellie, though forever marked by the experience, found a quiet solace in knowing she had helped protect other young athletes. She carried the weight of what happened, but also the strength of her courage. She made the difficult decision to step away from competitive gymnastics. The passion had been extinguished, replaced by a weariness she couldn't shake. She began exploring other interests, focusing on her mental well-being, on finding joy in simple things again. Susan and I, exhausted but closer than ever, began the slow, deliberate process of rebuilding our family life. We cherish the quiet moments now, the shared silences, the knowing glances. We became quiet advocates, occasionally speaking at local parent meetings, sharing our story not for glory, but to ensure other parents were vigilant, aware. I found a different kind of peace then, watching Ellie laugh freely with her friends, unburdened by the weight of a corrupted dream. She discovered new passions, drawing intricate designs in a sketchbook, learning to play the guitar. She found her own ways to fly, ways that were authentic to her, not dictated by a score or a coach. A quiet, hard-won sense of morality and resilience settled over our Midwestern home, a testament to the enduring power of a father's love and a family's relentless fight for justice. The dust eventually settled. Hayes was in prison. Olympus Gymnastics Academy was under new management, struggling to rebuild trust, and our family had found its footing on different ground. The financial strain had been immense, the emotional toll even heavier. We'd cashed out retirement, gone through our savings, just to keep our heads above water during the legal battle. But the quiet hum of Peterson's auto repair was returning, the familiar faces of loyal customers a comforting presence. Ellie never returned to competitive gymnastics. The passion had been irrevocably scarred. Instead, she found a love for photography, capturing light and shadow in a way that spoke to her artistic soul. She found her own kind of flight, soaring through images rather than on a beam. Susan and I learned to appreciate the smaller things, the quiet evenings, the simple joy of Ellie's laughter echoing through the house. We carried the experience, a permanent part of our family story, but also the strength that came from facing it down. The price for truth had been steep, but the cost of silence would have been immeasurable.